on Wednesday night during Greg's exhortation, and the cough drops now have encouraging phrases. And I looked down and it said, "Don't settle for less." On the other side of the piece of paper, it said, "Go get it." And after being exhorted by the cough drop and by Craig's exhortation, I picked out what I wanted to preach on Sunday morning. The phrase "don't settle for less," we may have used that before, especially of us that are older and probably have said that to the younger. And I think we all mean maybe something different by it. And after I get done this morning, you might come up to me and say, "Andrew, everything you described is actually what I mean when I say that." And I understand that. I get that. However, from a literal perspective, don't settle for less. Is this a Christian ideal? And is it an ideal that'll even work in the real world? Have you ever been house shopping before? If you've ever gone house shopping, which as many of you know probably takes a long time, you usually have a pros and a cons list about each house you see, and the house you get isn't necessarily your dream house. It's not the house that has absolutely everything exactly what you want. It's just actually the house that has more pros than cons. And the cons you feel like you can manage, or maybe you can do something about it. And so you settle for that house because you have to deal with availability, what's available, what's actually being sold, and what can you afford. So do you settle for less in that moment? Well, you do, and you very well, hopefully, are happy with that decision that you settled for those things, and you feel like you have a good house. So did you settle for less? Well, yeah, you did. Now, if you don't settle for less, how is the house shopping experience going to go? Well, you're going to be homeless. Because that's not how it works, right? That's not how the real world works. And I don't really necessarily think that's how God expects us to work either. Now, some of us use the phrase "don't settle for less," and what we're really actually trying to communicate is you are valuable. And if that's the only thing we're trying to communicate, well, that's true. And I can go off of a "you are valuable," right? And maybe the cliche that really works better for that is "don't sell yourself short," right? Are you a valuable person? Yes, you are a valuable person. And the world would like you to feel the other way, but you should feel that you are valuable and you are worth something. And I'm going to use a lot of the Psalms and Ecclesiastes and Proverbs to make these points this morning, but the Psalms speak very clearly that we are valuable to God, and that's really the only person it matters to impress. Psalm 139, David says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." And what's the idea here? The idea is that David's saying, I'm so valuable to God that he keeps up with me. And no matter where I go, he knows where I am because he cares about me. He even will sometimes get his hand and put it on me and take me through things, right? Do we keep up with our valuables? We try to, right? One time Clark had my wallet for 3 days. I finally found it in his toy box right before I started ordering new credit cards. What do I have now? Now I got air tags in those things, right? I got air tags on all my keys because another little boy likes to take my keys. That's what we try to do. We try to keep up with our valuables, right? Many of us have little children. We take them outside. Where those little children run? Y'all know. They run behind these bushes back here and they disappear. And we have to dig in there and grab our hands and pull them out and try to keep up with them. And why do we do all those things? Because those things are valuable to us. Well, the psalmist here understands that's how God feels about you. He keeps up with you. He knows where you are. And if you know this psalm, what's the next part? The next part is the "I'm fearfully and wonderfully made," right? And that's the next part of that psalm because that's how God feels about us. We are very valuable and we don't have to sell ourselves short, especially when we're dealing with other people. We are valuable to God's people. The psalmist also speaks about that. Psalm 26, he says, "Do not gather my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands is a sinister scheme and whose right hand is full of bribes. But as for me, I will walk in my integrity. Redeem me and be merciful to me. My foot stands in an even place. In the congregations, I will bless the Lord. Are you valuable to God's congregations? Yes, you are. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, right? That no, if you're someone of integrity and someone who seeks the Lord, well, the Lord takes you away from bloodthirsty men. He takes you from groups of people that are full of sinister schemes, and He puts you in an even place, in a good place. And what's the place that God puts you? He puts you in His congregations. That's what His plan is. And the idea is that you probably want to spend time with other people that are of integrity if you yourself is of integrity. Would you rather spend times with people that are constantly working for bribes, or people that work just because they have good character and they enjoy working in good character? No, good people enjoy being around good people. And here the psalmist says, who's responsible for that? That you can go and find a congregation of God, a group of people that care about you. Who's responsible for that? God's responsible for that. And you can't help think of Jesus' words when He was told that His mothers and His brothers and His sisters were there. He said, who is my mother or my brothers? But those that keep my commandments is my mother and my sisters and my brothers. And certainly that is the congregation of God's people. You are valuable to God's people. Now, who are you not valuable to? You're not valuable to the world. Now, the problem with that is that the world's a liar, and the world will tell you that you're valuable to the world, right? The corporations will tell you that you're valuable. And around this time of year, we see all the commercials telling us about how valuable we are. But really, what's valuable about us to corporations? It's those wallets that our children steal. That's what is valuable to them. You're not valuable to them. Many of you have heard another cliche about when you die, your family will miss you. But what will your company do? Your company will replace you. Well, that's because you're only as valuable as the work a company can get out of you, right? The entertainment industry that is pumped through our televisions talk about how special and how valuable you are. Well, how special and valuable are we really to them? Only our eyes, and again, our wallets, is the only how special we are to them. The world's a liar. And the world will tell you that you're valuable, but you yourself are not valuable. It's only what they can get out of you that makes you valuable. And frankly, I would argue that the world doesn't even really like itself sometimes. So why would it like you? And y'all know how this works. Many of y'all have been alive longer than I have. There'll be somebody in our world or in our community that's very popular. Everybody loves this person. Everybody celebrates this person. And what happens 2 years later? Nobody likes that person. And it's shameful to even talk about that person. They go through people like candy because the world doesn't even like itself. And there's no true loyalty found within the world. Proverbs 29 says, whoever is partner with a thief hates his own life. He swears to tell the truth but reveals nothing. What's the idea? I have a friend with a thief. And in a temporary sense, that thief can bring me good things. He steals things and shares them with me. But you know how I feel about myself? I hate myself because I'm friends with a thief. And even the worst person in the world knows that stealing's wrong. And we know that because they don't want to have anything stolen from them. There's a deception to all that. He swears to tell the truth, but he reveals nothing. We've made this point before. Who are the type of people that have to say, I swear to God all the time? Who are the type of people that have to say, I swear to God to talk to you? They're liars. And every time someone tells me, I swear to God, or they say, I swear on my mother, or whatever, I swear, I swear, I swear. The more they swear, the more I think that they're lying to me. And here he says, he who swears to tell the truth, but he reveals nothing. That man's a deceiver and a liar. The fear of a man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. Many seek the ruler's favor, but justice for man comes from the Lord. You know, we seek the favor of the government. We seek the favor of people with more power than us. We seek the favor of people with more money than us. But where does real happiness and justice and righteousness come from? It's not going to come from the government. It's not going to come from the powerful. No, it only can really truly come from God. And that's really the only person that matters that I'm find favor in. And finally, look at 27. An unjust man is an abomination to the righteous. A righteous man looks at a liar or looks at a thief and says, you're an abomination to me. I have to stay away from you. You're a plague to me. But look at it turn around there. And he who is upright in the way is an abomination to the wicked. Now, what does the worldly man do? The worldly man looks at the righteous man that's in his way, that's maybe telling him, I'm not going to participate with you in that. I can't go with you there. I can't do this for you. And what have you become to the wicked man? Well, now you're the abomination to him. So we're both calling each other an abomination here. So are you valuable to the world? No, you're not. And don't let the world lie to you and tell you that you are. The only place you're going to find value and love is with God and with God's people. And I think the Bible makes that very clear. I had someone several months ago tell to me that they were raised to learn in Bible class that people are inherently good. And they has now become adults, and they were so disappointed that those Bible class teachers were wrong and that people were not inherently good and people are actually usually cruel and evil. And my response to that was, what kind of Bible class are you going to? Because I was taught in Bible class, there are none righteous, no, not one. And that our great-great-grandparents, Adam and Eve, were sinners, and therefore they've released sin into the world. And when we become accountable, we become sinners too, and we are evil and corrupt without the grace of God. I was taught something totally different. And yet they think that the church believes, or God's people believes the opposite. But no, God's people believe that the world is wicked, and we can only find righteousness in the Lord. So let's go back to this thought. I won't settle for less. And I think we've covered it well that you are valuable. And if you want to use that phrase to talk about value, well, we know that we're valuable. But let's try to make this pretty practical. What I want to do first is I want to read a passage from the wisdom books. And then I want to quickly see if it applies to a common thought of I don't settle for less. Ecclesiastes 11. Solomon sort of ends his bigger thought here with this at the beginning of the chapter. He says, cast your bread upon the waters, and you will find it after many days. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. If the tree falls to the south or to the north in the place where the tree shall falls, there it shall be. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. And what's the idea? The idea is invest in the international market. And don't be worried about whether your shipments will make it or not. Just go ahead and send them out because you're going to miss 100% of the shots you won't take. There's another cliche, right? He also says there at the end, he who observes the wind or the rain will never sow. They look around and they go, well, is today a good time to plant? I don't know if today's a good time to plant, so they don't plant. And then the next day comes around. Is today a good time to plant? I don't know. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should see. And what happens by the time we get through the spring? Well, you never planted. And if you never plant, well, then you'll never reap, regardless of what the weather's doing. And so Solomon's saying, today's the day to go ahead and do the job. At least get it started, or at least get it done. Because you can't govern what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So in light of Ecclesiastes 11, and in concerning I won't settle for less, should I wait on that job to be perfect? You know, maybe I'm somebody that, maybe I got done with trade school. Maybe I'm somebody that has a degree of a certain job, a career I want to go after. And now I'm job hunting. And maybe I even have options. Maybe I even have opportunities. Should I just sit on my bottom and wait for the job to be absolutely perfect before I start it? Or do I need to sometimes settle for less? I think we all kind of see here, sometimes we're going to have to settle for less on certain aspects of the job. And I'm going to well round this out when we all get to the end, but we can just hold it right there. That there is a real world scenario where maybe this job allows me to come to church and to assemble. Maybe this job will give me enough that I can live off of. Maybe this job will allow me to live someplace that I think I need to live. But at the same time, they're not offering me near as much money as I'm worth. Is that an opportunity to maybe settle for something? Well, maybe sometimes we need to reevaluate our priorities and at least take a job now we have it. Because at the end of the day, if you're waiting around for the job to be perfect before you begin working, then what's going to happen? You're going to starve to death. That's what's going to happen, waiting for the job to be perfect. So that statement, again, in its literal sense, isn't necessarily true. Let's take it to another practical application. Proverbs 31, which many of us are very familiar with. This is the things that the mother of King Lemuel told him. It starts out in verse 10. Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. And then she goes on to explain the different characteristics of this virtuous wife. But as you know, verse 10 is very sarcastic. The idea is like, it's hard to do to find a virtuous wife, right? That's the idea. Her value is far above rubies. This is something that's rare to find, and if you find it, you need to consider yourself very fortunate that you did. That's the idea. When she ends the comment in 29, many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Notice here that way she breaks up the characteristics of the virtuous wife into different categories. What's the idea? Of other comparison to other women, she has done well. She's excelled them all, right? Then she explains her characteristics of her charm and of her beauty. And she's not saying that she's not charming or she's not beautiful. She's just saying that those things are very temporary in nature and should be handled as temporary in nature. Charm is deceitful. Why? Because I can be very charming to you for about a month. And I can be on my best behavior for a couple of weeks. But eventually, the real me is going to come out. Charm can be a liar. This person is not who you think they are. They're wearing a mask, right? Then she says, beauty is passing. What's the idea behind that? Do y'all remember years ago, Terry Benton was preaching a sermon, and he started it off with, some people are ugly when they're born, but as they age, they get more beautiful. Some people are beautiful when they're young, and they get ugly as they age. And some people are ugly their whole life. Y'all remember that? I remember that, and that lives in my brain rent-free. Obviously, beauty is something that's temporary. And of course, we of mature minds can say, well, beautiful is not necessarily just how it looks, and this person is still beautiful to me because this is my wife. Of course, I know we can do that, but who is he talking to? He's talking to a young man that's single and who doesn't want to be single. And you can see why she would say that, okay, but beauty is temporary, right? And men's beauty is also temporary, and it's probably even more temporary, right? Then here's another characteristic. Give her the fruit of her hands. She's productive. She gets things done, goes along right with that, and her own works praise her in the gates. Her fruit and work is so good that she's known for how skillful she is. This woman is described in many different ways. But what is the thought behind this last section? The thought is that two of those should not be held with the same amount of weight as the other three. That's obviously the idea, right? So, based off what we just read there, should I wait on the perfect person? And I get it. Some of us are happy that we're single, and there's a lot of wonderful things that Paul said about single people. And that's a whole sermon in itself, isn't it? God gets a lot of more work out of you when you're single. But there's some of us, obviously, that wish that we were married or plan one day to be married. Are you going to sit there and you're just going to wait on the very perfect person to come along that checks every single box that you dreamed of when you were 15 years old? And that's the person you're finally going to let you take you out on a date. You're going to die single. And you're going to wish you weren't single. That's how that's going to happen, right? And again, if you'll give me some grace here, I'm going to well round this out when we get to the end. But that's not how the real world works. And I think even here, Psalm 31 is speaking to that. That there's two of these things that you should not be necessarily need to check off the box, because those things are very temporary in nature and are very deceptive in nature, right? And that's what we described in the proverb. Many of us, I can't speak to young women. I can only speak to young men. I've never been a young woman, but I have been a young man. We dream of what we want or what we think we can get, which is something we're going to talk about later. You know, we want a woman as beautiful as Esther and as clever as Naomi and as faithful as Ruth and as courageous as Sarah. And we think that we're of such a caliber that we can attract that woman. Here's the issue, and here's the rub. I was planning on saying that, and my next joke was going to be, now I found that, but the rest of y'all just probably aren't going to be able to, right? And as older men that have been married for a while, we make jokes like that. Because probably many of y'all are going to come to me after me and say, well, Andrew, I know you said that wasn't possible, but I found that. And you've been married for 30 years, right? And I think this is the rub and where we get ourselves into trouble. I remember being a young kid and getting information like this. We hold advice from our older brothers in very high esteem, as we should. We hold advice from older brothers in very high esteem. But sometimes when older brothers give advice of this problem, we give advice that we would give ourselves to our spouse that we've been married to for 30 years instead of the advice we should give to a person that's been dating somebody for 3 weeks. One time, an older brother, very lovingly, I witnessed, told a young man who had been dating someone for a couple of weeks, saying, you just need to grab her by the hand and look her in the eyes and tell her, I need you. And that will make things get better for you in that relationship. You know, that's probably something great to tell to your wife if you've been married to her for 10, 20, 30 years, and it probably works really well on her. Because y'all have a husband and wife relationship like God intended to. That's more of an Ephesians 5 love situation, right? But you're talking to somebody that's been dating somebody for a couple of weeks. What's going to happen when you hold her hands and look her in the eyes and say, I need you, after you've been dating a couple of weeks? She's going to be gone and you're never going to see her ever again. That's what's going to happen, right? And actually, the real thing that you need to do is you don't need to look desperate. Instead, you have to hold yourself in such a caliber where I am content to be single. I am content to date you. And you know, frankly, I'm content to date her too. And hey, I'm enjoying our time together. And that's really how far it needs to be right then. And that's all it needs to be right then. And that would be more likely of what you can do. And as well, to go along with that, we're going to meet individuals. We're going to meet men and women that we like, and we're going to realize that they aren't necessarily as beautiful as Esther, or have as much common sense as Naomi, or as faithful as Ruth, or as courageous as Sarah. We're going to meet people, men and women, that are very good looking, but they don't have any common sense. There's young people that are very spiritually minded, very good looking, and they still have no common sense. There are people that are very spiritually minded and have a lot of common sense, but they're not very good looking. There are people that are good looking and smart, but they are not spiritually minded at all. What are you going to settle on? Because if you're going to marry a human, you're going to have to settle. There was only one person that was ever perfect, and he's not somebody you can marry like that. So again, is settle for less necessarily a godly thought? Not in the literal sense, it's not, right? And we'll round that out again at the end. The fool says in his heart, Psalm 14, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. They have all turned aside. They have become together, become corrupt. There is none who does good. No, not one. Any thoughts here with the fool says in his heart there is no God? I think the idea is someone who says there is no God depends on self-righteousness. He or she doesn't believe that righteousness comes from somewhere else. They believe that righteousness comes from themselves. And they decide what's righteous and what's wrong. And that's the very thing that makes them foolish, right? Because there is none who does good. And then, of course, you get to verse 3. There is none who does good, no, not one. Paul uses this passage in Romans 3 to make his point there. There is no one that's righteous without God. And we depend on God to become righteous, right? He can forgive us from our sins. He can help teach us what righteousness is. He can help us in our practical holiness. So if that's the case, should I wait till I'm perfect, till I obey the gospel? Or am I going to have to say enough is enough? Well, based off our either logical, practical applications, I can't wait till I'm perfect to obey the gospel, because I'm going to die waiting to be perfect to obey the gospel. And we say, well, if I just will do this, and if I just do this, and if I just do this, well, when is enough going to be enough? And that's enough that I can come and submit to the Lord and obey the gospel. Well, if I'm making lists and I'm making requirements that are not found in this book, well, I'm never going to have enough. Because Peter said repentance and belief is enough to be baptized in the name of remission of sins. He didn't give a long lister than that. And no one gives a longer list than that. If I wait till I'm perfect, well, it's never going to happen. And so to sort of well round this out, I think maybe the most literal sense of the phrase that does work with the passage we have read is be specific on what I settle on. And that's really more important. And maybe a better way of saying that would be reevaluate your priorities in this life. And if I reevaluate my priorities, I can make a pros and cons list and say the pros outweigh the cons, so this is the decision I'm going to make. And I think that's godly wisdom to do so, living in this imperfect world. I have to settle on an aspect of a good job, don't I? And maybe this isn't the job I want right now. Maybe this isn't the job I see myself doing in the future. But the pros and cons list, the pros outweigh the cons, and I can go ahead and settle on this good job. Proverbs 37, this is the proverb of Agur, and we're going to read this several times through these 3 points. In verse 7, he says, 2 things I request of you. Deprive me not before I die. Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me. Lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. The idea here is God, he's telling God, God, just give me my food to eat. But Lord, don't make me so rich that I feel like I don't need you. But also, Lord, don't make me so poor that I feel like I have to steal to eat. Keep me somewhere in the middle. He said, that's where I want to be, right? Where I don't have to steal to eat, but I know that I still rely on you for every blessing. And that's someone that's evaluated his priorities, right? This job pays what I think it should pay, but it's going to keep me away from God's people all the time. Well, maybe I should try to find a different job, right? This job doesn't pay what I think it should pay, but it'll keep me where my family, where I feel like we need to be, and it allows me to work with God's people. Okay, I'll settle on that, right? And God can provide to me the food allotted to me, can I? Is that someone settling for less? Yes, but they're being very specific on what they settle on. Are you going to settle on the spiritual aspects so you can have the material aspects? Or are you willing to settle on the material aspects so you can have the spiritual aspects? Those are the priorities we have to consider. Many of y'all remember what Jesus told Laodicea in Smyrna in the book of Revelation. What did he tell the Laodiceans? He says, you say I am rich, but you are poor and naked. And then Jesus beforehand tells the church at Smyrna, I know of your poverty, but you are rich. And what's the idea? Jesus saw them as spiritually rich, but in material poverty, and the Lord rewarded them for that. Versus the Laodiceans, that in terms of their material, they were in poverty. In terms of their material, they were rich, but spiritually, they were in poverty. Those are people that needed to reevaluate their priorities, right? And Jesus tells them to reevaluate their priorities. We are going to have to settle of everything. Do y'all think another one of the world's lies is the world tells us we can have the best of both worlds? The world tells us, Andrew, you can have all the good things of this world and all the good things of God and his people at the same time. And you don't have to compromise anybody. We'll let you go to church on Sunday, but on Saturday, you can go hang out with the world. You can have the best of both worlds. What would Jesus call that? Jesus called that serving two masters. And he said, no, that person just serves the world, is what that is. That's another one of the world's lies. I can't do both. I have to settle on a characteristic of a good person. But I need to be careful on what characteristic I settle on, right? Go to Proverbs 30 again, later in verse 11. He says, there is a generation that curses its father and does not bless its mother. There's a generation that is pure in its own eyes, yet is not washed from its filthiness. There is a generation, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There is a generation whose teeth are like swords, and whose fangs are like knives, to devour the poor of the earth, off the earth, and the needy from among men. He's saying there's a wicked generation that's very lofty in their own eyes and so pure in their own eyes, but they're covered in filthiness. And I think, again, there lies the issue when we believe we don't have to settle on anybody or anything if we desire to be married. We've covered that. You don't have to be married. But if you desire to be married, you are going to have to settle on some characteristics. My question again is, what characteristics are you going to settle on? Do I care if that person's successful, skillful, maybe like the virtuous woman? Can I settle on that thing because she's beautiful and she's charming and maybe she's even spiritually minded? Well, maybe I could settle on that. This woman has no common sense, but she's very spiritually minded and she cares about a lot of these very important things. I think you probably could, right? You know, here's a guy here that's ugly as can be. And you're really not that attracted to him. But maybe you're being willing to spend some time with him because he's very spiritually minded. He's very successful. And he's very skillful about the things that he does. And there's some attractiveness there that's not necessarily attractiveness you see with your eyes. And I know women that have married those type of men and are in love with those men. But you know, they weren't really necessarily good-looking 20-year-olds. But we also know people that have married people that are very charming and very beautiful, but have no spiritual mindedness about themselves at all. Well, which characteristic are you going to settle on? Because evidently all three of those groups have decided to settle on certain characteristics. And I think the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 tells us which characteristics we should be the most willing to settle on. Right? Let me say this, and I think this will keep me from getting out of trouble. I know in my short life, especially I think more of in my 20s, I know a lot of young men that have walked past many godly, beautiful women and then at the same breath complain about how there were no good girls here to date. And especially when you're married, you don't care anymore, and you're like, what about her? Well, I just don't feel anything for her. Well, maybe you should, right? And maybe men are just as susceptible to romance stories as women are. And maybe sometimes men are so lofty in their own eyes that they are chasing only exclusively girls that are so out of their league they will never catch them. Because for some reason, men, we often like to rate ourselves 10 out of 10. But are we 10 out of 10 people? You lucky if you get a 3 out of 10. And that's how we probably should feel about it. And I really think a lot of the solutions we come to, what is the solution here? I think the solution is humility. That I'm not a perfect person and I'm looking for someone that's not perfect. And maybe that will help me from not being so lofty in my own eyes, but settle on very important characteristics and maybe overlook some others. Proverbs 30 continues in verse 5. The leech has 2 daughters. Verse 15. The leech has 2 daughters. Give and give. There are 3 things that are never satisfied, 4 that never say enough. The grave, the barren womb, the earth that is not satisfied with water. The fire never says enough. And he's shameful of these things. He says these things are never satisfied, but they should be. And a human has to be satisfied and say enough sometimes. That's plenty enough for what I need. Settle on the aspect that God does not need me to be perfect. He just needs me to repent. And maybe instead of making up qualifications that don't exist in the text, maybe I can tell myself, you know what, right now, I am enough to obey the gospel. Because the Lord doesn't require much out of me, he just needs me to turn around and to repent. And that's something I can do right now, and that's enough. And if that's enough for God, that certainly has to be enough for me. As a way of invitation, and thank you for your close attention, let me show you the end of Proverbs 30. Not the end, the beginning of Proverbs 30. I'm fascinated with this statement. And it kind of encapsulates a lot of the things we've talked about. Agur begins his proverb like this. He says, who has ascended into heaven or descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fist? Who has bound the waters in a garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is his son's name? If you know. How prophetic is that? When we read the proverb of Agur, what do we get to say after verse 4? We get to say, oh, I know his name. And I know his son's name. His son's name is Jesus Christ. If there's anyone here that's enough to come to Jesus Christ, which again, the Lord has made his enough not very big. We want to assist you with that if you'll come forward as we stand and as we sing.